I'm going to try and keep this interactive, and I would really appreciate if you guys ask me questions. There is a separate question and answer session at the end of it. Or if at any point I'm talking nonsense, please feel free to stop me and ask me why I'm talking nonsense. Because I tend to do that. Because it's part of my job. As you can see, I'm a radio jockey. I work with this radio station called 93.5 Red FM. I do the radio show. This session is podcasting with WordPress, and unfortunately the with WordPress part is a bit of a misnomer, because I believe in the podcasting bit of it. With WordPress, I believe WordPress is a tool that can be effectively leveraged, and it's one of the best tools to be leveraged. But I'm primarily going to be talking about the podcasting part. So first of all, hola, ¿cómo están todos? Me llamo Shrikant. Trabajo en 93 Roja FM, and hago un programa de radio llamado MS 935, and todos los días 5 hasta 9. If you're wondering why I'm speaking in Spanish, it's because I just wanted to convey the power of a podcast. I had no idea about the Spanish language or how to speak it 3 months ago. 3 months ago, I found this podcast called Coffee Break Spanish, and you can find it on coffeebreakspanish.com. I'm not affiliated with them. I just love the concept. They're 15-minute programs, they're 15-minute episodes, and they teach you Spanish in 15 minutes. For 3 months, I heard about 80 episodes, and this sentence that I spoke in front of you, I constructed it myself. I know what I'm saying, and I can understand if you speak Spanish. I might not be able to respond immediately, but I'll be able to come up with a proper Spanish response in a few minutes. That's the power of the podcast. That is what a podcast can do. Essentially, I was just introducing myself in Spanish. I said, my name is Shrikant. I work for Red FM 93.5 Red FM. I do a show called MS 935 from 5 to 9 on weekdays. That's all I said. But I could say this in Spanish because of this brilliant podcast called Coffee Break Spanish. And that's exactly what we're going to sort of evaluate today. Because I find that podcast to be a brilliant example of how a good podcast should sound like. First of all, I want to know from you, what do you think a podcast is? And what do you think a podcast does? Anyway, somebody. Audio files, yeah, but how do you consume a podcast? And not as in technically, but
something like story, story in a repository.
Yeah. This is actually the answer I was kind of looking for, being a radio jockey and whatnot. For me, a podcast is what I do. It's called broadcast, but essentially what I do is a form of podcast. I do a show. What do I do in a show? I basically talk about stuff. A podcast is exactly that. It is talking about stuff. So I'm going to play the example that I told you about, Coffee Break Spanish. I'm going to play that first ever episode, and I want you to listen to it carefully. I'm going to play about 5 minutes of it. I want you to listen to it carefully. I'm playing this. Can everyone hear this? Can you? what you heard?
Spanish.
You heard Spanish. How did it begin?
In English.
In English. What happened after? What's the first sentence he said? What are the first few words he said?
Something about learning Spanish.
Correct. The first few words he said were Coffee Break Spanish, episode 1. And then the music played. What was the music about? Did you get to hear some of the lyrics of the music?
That was in Spanish.
That was in Spanish and English mixed. Spanish and English mixed. So essentially what we saw here was the beginning of a podcast. Come on. I'll play this once again from the beginning. Lesson 1. The music begins. After the music ends, he's introducing himself. They're introducing themselves. So by minute 1, you know this is a Spanish podcast, you know they're going to teach you Spanish, you know that this guy called Mark is going to be your teacher, you know that this student called Kara is going to be learning with you. And in a minute, you already have everything clear in front of you. That is exactly what a podcast is supposed to be, and that is exactly how we conduct our shows on radio. There is something called a radio litmus filter that we use that I'll be talking about shortly. But before that, I want to go back to the presentation. We've done an example. Every podcast has a typical structure. Like a radio show, it is divided into a beginning, a middle and an end. The beginning is the introduction, the middle is the actual content part, and the end is where you reiterate and rephrase and retell the audience what they have been listening to. It is unlikely that someone will listen to 10 podcasts a day because all podcasts typically are at least 20-30 minutes long, and it is very unlikely that you'll be spending 300 minutes listening to podcasts all your day. But if you do that, more power to you. In any case, a good podcast should always have a beginning, a middle and an end. The middle should be chock full of content, the beginning and the end should be crisp enough for the person to remember what it is, which is why typically a musical interlude, a musical introduction is used. The musical introduction helps you register better. It's not that you'll always have the chance to have a musical introduction, but if you can get it somehow, somewhere, you have a brilliant job in your hand. Let's do a quick exercise. I want you to go back to college mentally and tell me one quality of the best lecture you ever attended. Give me one quality, one adjective describing the best lecture you attended.
Funny.
Funny.
Interactive.
Interactive.
Examples.
Examples, okay. Go on. Can anybody think of anything else? You haven't had a best lecture ever? Is that how bad your colleges are? Is that how bad your college education is? Really? Man, I should start teaching in colleges. But probably not. So seriously, come on. Think of the best teacher you've ever had. Give me a quality of the guy. Concept. So conceptually strong?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good one.
Informative.
Okay, informative. That's actually quite important.
Crisp and clear.
Sorry?
Crisp and clear.
Crisp and clear. So shall we say brevity?
Yeah.
Brevity, okay.
I think the involvement in interactive would be same.
Involvement and interactive would be the same. Involvement in terms of the professor, now that's another quality that we can probably consider. So let's put professor involvement or tutor involvement. Because that's also quite important. What else? What else?
Not
Give me two more.
Not
Let's just-
theoretical, but practical in terms of what you explained.
So, examples.
Science.
Examples. Okay. Something else? How about punctual? We don't like lectures that go on beyond the stipulated ring. Punctual? Okay. What else?
Clears doubt. Clears doubt.
Clears doubts. Clears doubts could come in conceptually strong, probably, or
Human everyone.
Q&A. But Q&A goes into interactive, right? Q&A kind of goes into interactive. I'm basically trying to figure out if we've covered sort of an exhaustive list of stuff. Have we? The best lecture in your class so far?
Funny.
Funny.
Oh,
Funny. So funny is obviously always on top. Okay, now let's go to the other end of the spectrum. The worst.
Boring.
Boring.
Mean teacher.
Mean. Okay.
Confused.
Confused. Okay. And
Lengthy lectures.
lengthy. Oh yeah. I used to hate those.
Only theory.
Only theory. Okay.
Taken by Shrikant Joshi.
Taken by Shrikant.
I'm kidding.
Okay, sorry, I forgot. I'm kind of in the flow here. What else?
Discourage interactive.
Discourages interactivity. So, monologue.
Monologue, yeah.
What else? And we have a lot of negative points coming up like. Okay, go on, please tell me, are there any more?
Can't hear properly or can't see the board properly.
Low volume?
And also can't, well, it's not clear because
Unclear, let's just.
the board is too far away or sound is not clear. Class is
I hope you guys are not talking about this session.
No, seriously, I mean, haven't you sat in lectures which are like, सुनाई नहीं दे रहा है.
So, unclear, visual and audio.
The room is too cold.
Now you're just nitpicking. But seriously, any more? Any more? Physically uncomfortable, yes, that's another one.
What
The
are
room is too cold, falls into.
No, the room is too cold, they don't allow tea breaks.
So, what did the worst lecture make you feel? Think about that.
Sleepy.
Sleepy. So horrifying. I have just attended the word lounge, so I'm going to use
Soporific. Not soporific.
soporific. Yes, there we go. Soporific.
Murderous.
Now we're just talking Stefan Meyer characters.
I have a gavel.
Alright, this seems like a good one. Best lectures are funny, interactive, they are full of examples, they are conceptually strong, they are held by informative people, they have brevity, they are short, crisp and clear. The tutor is involved in the subject and with the students. The tutor is punctual, which means he starts on time and ends on time, which I hope to be. I hope this session has elements of this, not all of this. The worst lectures are boring, they are conducted by mean people, confused people, they are lengthy, they are only full of theory and practicals. They have a long monologue by the tutor, by the teacher. They are unclear in terms of visual and audio, they make you physically uncomfortable, they make you sleepy, soporific and nervous. I'm just going to change one word on this board. Of course, these are superlatives, but this is essentially what you have to keep in mind while designing your podcast. The thing is, there are not too many podcasts on the web that are done by Indians, that are done by and for Indian languages, and I want that to change. Look, in radio, we anyways do something of a podcast of sorts. Except we call them links, because we are linking a song with an ad set, or linking two songs together, or linking a song with something else. So we essentially do elements of a podcast. If we bring all of it together, we anyways have a podcast ready, except we are too lazy to do it. एक तो रेडियो में already करते हैं, अब आगे स्टार्ट हो गए उसको किधर जाएंगे? But I still try and put up stuff on my SoundCloud page. There are a lot of copywriting issues involved that we have to clear with legal and whatnot. They have given us a free hand on most of the topics, but there are some things that you still have to clear, which is why we are a bit lazy about doing it. But essentially, I want you guys, each one of you guys, to actually start podcasting. Why do people steer clear of podcasts? I really want to know. Have you ever considered starting a podcast? Any of you? You have. You have. So what would your podcast be about?
I'd like to do a talk, short talks about the kind of topics I write about, and also maybe showcasing, I do spoken word performances.
Absolutely, absolutely. Why haven't you started here?
Technology, I'm not sure what is the best way to record it, put it up, all of that is.
I hope to clear some of those questions today. That's the aim of this talk. And I knew that technology would be one of the hurdles. How about you? What
I
podcast?
recently did 2 podcasts and published it from my blog.
Okay.
One is my poem, which is in Hindi, and one is on the social issue. It says why we don't need feminism.
Okay.
It's again in English actually.
Okay.
So I have recently published it and I use Audacity.
Absolutely. It's a brilliant piece of software, and I'm primarily going to be working with Audacity
So
today.
I would like to know one thing. In the first podcast, the voice was not very clear. While when I did the second one, I got the correct, so I know.
Exactly. There are a couple of tricks in Audacity that will help you clear your voice, that will help you clean your audio. And Audacity is something called a DAW, Digital Audio Workstation, like a Sony Vegas Pro or a SoundCoach or a Pro Tools or Nuendo or all of these names that you hear. And they are not difficult at all. Let me be absolutely clear, they are not difficult at all. I hope to show you a few examples of what you can do and how you can do it in the course of the next 30 minutes or so. But the point being, most of the people I know are worried about starting their podcasts because they think नहीं यार उसमें बहुत मेहनत लगती है, रिकॉर्ड करना पड़ता है, फिर बाद में वो रिकॉर्डिंग सेटअप अच्छा होना चाहिए, ये होना चाहिए, वो होना चाहिए, कुछ ज़रूरत नहीं है. You can start a podcast with your phone. आजकल phones इतने powerful mics के साथ आए हैं that you can record without having to worry about background noise. And even if there is background noise, I will show you tricks to clean that background noise without having to, be worried about whether this will sound professional or not. It is not about sounding professional. If you want to sound professional, you will eventually get paid for it. Look for a studio and you can also have a professional setup of your own. But don't worry about that. Podcasting is all about getting your feelings out there. What you write, you can instead speak. And you could start a podcast simply by reading a book. An audiobook is also a form of a podcast. So if you want practice, start reading a book. Start reading it as if you were narrating the book to someone. That's the easiest form of a podcast. Pick up a short story, read it out. Oh, Henry के ढेर सारे short stories हैं. उठाओ, एक-एक पढ़ो हर रोज, फोन रखो, रात के अंधेरे में पढ़ो. तुम्हारे घर वाले बोलेंगे क्या बकवास कर रहा है, तुम पागल हो गए हो क्या? बोलने दो उनको. हम अगर वो नहीं करते तो मैं लाइफ में भी आरजे नहीं बनता, मैं लाइफ में कभी रेडियो पे नहीं होता. I would have been doing something else, probably staring at the stars and writing down notes. I would have been an astrophysicist. I don't know, or whatever. The point is, just start. Like I said, that's basically your podcast, right there. All you need to remember while designing your podcast, and I use the word designing very emphatically because you need to design a podcast. You need to know what you're going to talk about. तुम शुरुआत में चाहे जितना टाइम पास कर लो, but जब तुम podcast कर रहे हो, तो think of it in terms of a series. In fact, borrow from TV and radio very liberally. We just heard a sample podcast a few minutes ago, Coffee Break Spanish. It had a title plate and bumper, which was essentially Coffee Break Spanish Lesson 1. It had a musical introduction. It had a verbal introduction. Think of your favorite TV serial. It has a title plate, person of interest. It has a musical introduction which also consists of the credits. It has a verbal introduction in terms of the characters setting up the plot. It has a content package, which is the story in itself. The content package is typically divided into 3 parts, which loop. So for the programmers out there, this is a for loop or a while loop. So content, then there is a bumper, then ads, go back to content, bumper, ads, 3 बार होता है ये घंटे में. If If you notice, all TV serials, all radio shows follow this pattern. Radio shows में सिर्फ closing bumper और credits नहीं होता उतना ही. because closing bumper और credits के लिए time नहीं है हमारे पास. We are very short on time in life. हम लोग बहुत घाई वाले लोग होते हैं. But these are typically found in TV. And this is exactly how you have to structure your podcast. This is the structure, this is the skeleton of a podcast episode. But how do you design a podcast? What goes into a podcast? For that you again have to think in terms of TV. Think of the best serial you've seen. What's the best serial you've seen? Name one. It could be a Sasbo serial. I don't freaking care.
Modern Family.
Modern Family.
Breaking
Brilliant.
Bad. Friends. Breaking Bad.
Friends, Breaking Bad. What was it about Friends or Breaking Bad or Modern Family that kept us hooked?
Nice.
Story, exactly. Every episode was unique and every episode had a story, had a specific clear story. How they wove this story is also something that kept you hooked. Modern Family, for example, had one of the most brilliant closings of all time. Modern Family का closing bumper के पहले का scene was always beautiful. They always brought 4 different situations together so beautifully. I haven't found a parallel, and I love Modern Family for that. Breaking Bad का tension was brilliant.
Community also does a good closing.
Yeah, Community does a brilliant closing. Community does a brilliant out there.
Troy and Abed.
Yeah, they always have one out there scene. So each of them has tapped into one specific feature that they have highlighted without you understanding that they have highlighted, but you subconsciously know that there is one feature. That is the first thing you design in a podcast. You have to ensure that you know what that one feature of your podcast is. If you are doing an audiobook, your one feature could be that every character of yours is different in voice. Do it yourself, get someone else to do it. If you can mimic, nothing like it. If you can't mimic, try and put a different inflection on the character. But one feature. Always have one feature that separates your podcast from the others. And that will essentially get you into your podcast. That will get you hooked onto your podcast. Get you hooked onto your own podcast. And that's very important, passion for your podcast. So if you don't have passion for doing this, then I just do not do it. And the passion comes from one simple thing, experimenting. Feel free to experiment. जितना चाहिए उतना experiment करो. Because उसी से तुम्हारा podcast बदलते जाता है. When I started in radio, I had absolutely no idea what to do. I have very literally learned it on the job. I don't claim to do a good job. I still don't think I do a good job. But I enjoy what I do. And that's most important. I'm actually enjoying what I do. So like I said, radio also borrows a lot from TV in terms of structure, but everything is audio. And we have to specifically make everything audio, which is why I would really want you to listen to radio stations, not for the kind of content that they do, but for the kind of structure that they have. Listen to 1 hour of radio every day. You will understand the challenges that you will face when you are doing a podcast. The first and foremost challenge that a lot of people fail to realize is that radio is entirely audio, which means everything that you are doing has to be narrated. Close your eyes right now. Close your eyes, all of you, close your eyes. And as I speak, just listen to my voice and tell me what I am doing. Can you see me doing something? Can you see my hands moving? Can you see my legs moving? Can you see me moving on the stage? You are imagining me doing something. I may not be doing that. But suppose I tell you that right now I am waving my hands. Suppose I tell you that right now both my hands are up in the air. Suppose I tell you that right now I am jumping up and down. You can see me doing it. But I had to tell you that I am doing all of this. Open your eyes. I did none of that. But I made you think I did that. I made you think. That's the power of audio. Audio is a very suggestive medium and it's one of the most beautiful media to work with. I love working in audio. But that's also because I have a face for radio. That's what my mother said. You have a perfect face for radio, son. I said, yes, my boss says the same. But essentially, yeah. आप जब भी podcast करोगे, especially a lot of people think, yeah, we can do a conversation podcast. Go ahead, please do it. कॉन्वर्सेशन पॉडकास्ट में हम एक बात भूल जाते हैं, टॉपिक भूल जाते हैं, नहीं एब्सोल्युटली टॉपिक भूल जाते हैं, बट मोर इम्पोर्टेंटली वी फॉरगेट टू नरेट एक्शंस. So for example, suppose me and BD, we are great friends and we are talking and we are doing a podcast, and suddenly BD says, what do? I'll say, BD is waving his hands like crazy, his eyes are wide open and he's screaming at me without a voice, don't talk about this. BD, why don't you want me to talk about this? You have created a visual for your listener. Feel free to narrate everything that you find. That's the essence of a podcast. Everything is audio and you have to make everything audio. I'm going to give you some industry secrets.
Shrikant, when it comes to a conversation in a podcast, do you think it's better to have it scripted? Because conversations tend to be
They tend
when you're part of it and maybe when you're watching, but sunne mein there's a lot of the whole ha 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 and oh my god, no this and oh god, get on with it.
If you ever hear a tech podcast, you will feel like murdering them. Get there faster!
Yes.
You are talking about the new Samsung Galaxy Edge. You have done everything but talk about it. Get there faster. But yeah, that is one of the biggest problems of a conversational podcast and even on radio. It's called the co-jogging problem. We call it the co-jogging problem. When there are two jocks who are enjoying each other's company, they tend to enjoy it so much, they forget the radio. No, they forget the radio station entirely. अबे कल मैं गया था यहाँ, अबे ये किया वो किया, अबे टाइम दे क्या हो गया? लगे अपने 3 मिनट, 3.5 मिनट, 4 मिनट बात किए जा रहे हैं, प्रोड्यूसर सर पे हाथ लेके बैठ रहा है. बंद करो इनको. But yeah, conversations you tend to go off the rails a lot of times, and one way to maintain it is to have a moderator in the conversation. If it's a two-person conversation, one of them plays the role of a moderator, or they keep switching the roles of moderators, so that whenever, and you have to look at it from a third perspective. You know you want to talk about it, you know your co-host wants to talk about it, but the moment you realize कि कुछ ज़्यादा हो रहा है, change the topic. Bindas change the topic. Move on to the next topic. Which is why you always have to have a script. But before that, a few recording tips that I wrote down in the middle of the night because I felt like writing them down. These may or may not be important to you. The first of them is record in a proper studio if you can. Believe it or not, studios in Pune are available for $700 an hour. And that's like a random figure I'm throwing. You negotiate it with them, you can get it down to $400 an hour. If you are doing a regular conversational podcast, feel free to hire a studio. Tell them you want your studio for 1 hour, we need to record. You need to record whatever we say and give the raw file to us. We do whatever we want with it. That's it. If you can, and if you're really honestly thinking about starting a podcast, think about the studio. It will save you lots of time in the post-production, in the post-processing. Or a closed padded room. Now not a padded cell, but if you can get a padded room or a closed room. In fact, this is also a good room to record a podcast. The only problem with this room is it has a slight echo. A very slight echo which you hear.
Windows very noisy.
I can close the windows. I can close the windows. See, if I have a constant source of noise, as in the fan, I can eliminate that. And it's very easy to eliminate it. In fact, my software will take care of it. I don't even have to go into the finer details of it. Any room that has a constant source of noise can be eliminated. But the noise has to be constant and very low volume. It can't be going to program or thop, 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 thop. That noise is not acceptable.
That's not really constant.
No, the spikes are also not done. The spikes are very difficult to eliminate. They're called clipping and whatnot.
That's not constant.
Anyway, so look for a studio or look for a room with not zero but constant minimum noise. Whenever there is an interruption, re-record that bit. Always re-record and don't worry about re-recording. Re-recording gives you two advantages. One, you get a second take, and two, you get a break in your thoughts which allows you to recompose yourself and maybe change topic if need be. Because that you're fumbling around for words that you're thinking a lot and you don't know how to put it and you're trying to find the right words to put it, and I've said the same thing 4 times, you guys didn't realize. All I wanted to say was, there is a break. Okay, let me move on to the next topic. My next topic is, try not to overlap your co-host. This is very important. When you're and you don't agree with something your co-host says, you feel like saying, but 1 minute. It's a podcast. People can't see what you're doing. Raise your hand. This will signal to your co-host कि रुक मेरे को बोलने दे. Your co-host will then get an इशारा कि चलो खत्म करते हैं उसको बोलने दो. If the co-host still doesn't stop after 30 seconds and say, right, you know what, I'm going to interrupt you right there. Why are these words important? Because these are unimportant words. Ironically.
Yeah. They kind of break in
Yeah.
between. They're like the full stops and pauses.
Exactly.
People are used to that.
So people will not realize, will not focus on it, but you haven't lost anything important in saying it. So always interrupt very pleasantly by saying, you know what, I want to interrupt you right there. That will even वो बोल रहा है वो क्या कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. But you've managed to get into the conversation and then you can start making your point. I'm talking very glibly about this entire thing because podcasts can be a wide variety of things. Podcasts can be about conversations, podcasts can be about audiobooks, podcasts can be radio plays, even those are podcasts. You can do a podcast about anything else, everything in the world rather. But I can't specifically tell you कि ये इसमें करना चाहिए, वो उसमें करना चाहिए. I'm going to give you a broad perspective on what to do when you're doing the podcasts. Don't worry about your pauses and fumbles. Those can be very easily edited out in a matter of seconds, which I'll show you using Audacity. And don't be afraid to use a digital audio workstation or a digital audio editor, whatever. In radio stations, we typically use Sony Vegas or SoundForge. Audacity is a brilliant piece of software. It is absolutely free. You don't even have to install it. There are zipped versions available that are portable. You can just unzip it into a folder and start working out of it right away. You don't have to like go through this entire process of install, next, yes, register, whatnot. कुछ करने की जरूरत नहीं. Unzip, install, unzip, open, run. मैंने वही किया. तो कोई टेंशन नहीं. But don't be afraid of the part called post-processing. There is nothing to post-processing. It's actually the easiest job in the world. The only skill in that part is what to keep and what not to keep. And that is something that podcasters today need to realize. You may think that by editing portions of a podcast, you are trying to keep the honesty of it sacrosanct, but what you are doing is you are boring your audience.
By not editing.
By not
You
editing.
said by editing.
Sorry, yeah, by not editing. I meant to say by not editing. The thing is, as a radio professional, I have gotten used to the concept that I have very little time on radio. Okay, honestly, how many minutes in an hour do you think we guys on radio talk? I genuinely want to know this. Those who know the answer, shut up. And by that I mean you do. Quickly give me numbers between 1 to 60 because there are only 60 minutes in an hour. How many minutes in an hour do you think radio guys speak? 20. 20 to 30.
No.
You know the answer.
You're counting only the anchor of the show.
Yeah, only the
ads.
answer. 6 to 7. What
Yeah.
is 6 to 7?
Yeah.
How many people agree with him? 6 to 7 says.
I'd probably say about 5, 6.
Both of them are right.
At one stretch?
So, in an hour.
Total.
We speak for 6 to 7 minutes in an hour. बाकी गाने कौन बजाएगा? ऐड कौन सुनाएगा?
Because a song is about 2 to 3 minutes at least. And they play a song.
Every radio station plays anything between 30 to 40 minutes of songs and about 15 odd minutes of ads, depending on what.
15 minutes of ads?
हाँ, because they're split into 4 parts, no? It's a 4-minute segment. Ads of radio नहीं. टीवी पे भी वही होता है. टीवी पे तो अभी रेगुलेशन आ गया कि 12 मिनट टोटल है. रेडियो पे रेगुलेशन बहुत जल्द आ गया. But yeah, we speak for about a minute and a half every time we come on air. And we
See, I
come on
think the
air
trouble
for
is on radio, the ads are also again sort of like content pieces in some ways. We are all now on TV, we know this is an ad.
Correct.
Even if we come in the middle and we've never seen that ad before, instinctively you know it's an ad
Yeah.
as opposed to real content. But on radio, it's a little difficult sometimes to tell.
That's credit to some of the radio advertisers, but there are other radio advertisers who've been very religiously trying to ensure that all efforts of these genuine advertisers are ruined by ensuring that they make ads that sound like ads. So very soon you won't have to worry about that. There will be ads on radio which will sound like blatant ads and you're going to hate them the same way you hate TV.
When I think of station switching.
will happen soon, and we are very afraid of that. But anyway, yeah, the point is we speak 6 minutes an hour on radio, and we understand the importance of crunching our content. This is why the most important piece of advice I can give is this. This is the most important piece of advice that every radio show guy will tell you. Script your show. We never go unscripted on air, and by scripting I don't mean we write every line that we speak. We know what we are going to talk about. We know our topics. We know every point that we come on air, what we are going to be talking about once we open our mouths. Because if we don't, then my audience is going to get bored. My audience doesn't have a point to stick around for. मैं randomly कुछ बोल रहा है, आज पेड़ अच्छे लग रहे हैं, आज वहाँ बाहर मुझे अच्छी दिख रही है, आज ट्रैफिक ज़्यादा है. What are you doing? Point क्या है तुम्हारा? बोलो कुछ. काम की बात करो, काम की बात. So I script your show. The most important part of scripting for a podcast is knowing what you're going to do. Has anybody heard the serial podcast? It's a podcast called Serial. If you have about 50 minutes of free time every day, I want you to listen to.
I said.
If you can, I want you to listen to at least one episode from the podcast Serial. It's a very serious podcast. It's a story about unsolved crime cases or crime cases in which the victim was, or rather the person accused was probably wrongly accused. So it's a fresh take on some criminal cases that have been long marked or something. Very brilliantly done. The point is that episode is very clear on what it is going to accomplish. Which is why I keep saying script. Which is why I keep saying script your flow. Which is why I keep saying design your podcast. Let's take an example podcast. Can someone come up with a topic for a podcast? Can I have a eraser of sorts? Is there an eraser of sorts?
Yeah, just for that. Madam, duster.
Duster?
So let's come up with a topic for a podcast quickly. Anybody? Somebody?
Education.
Education. Okay. What can we do with education? What kind of a podcast do you want to do with education?
Tell them the options besides the regular medicine and engineering that children can study.
So offbeat careers.
Offbeat.
That's your basic basic reason for the podcast. These are whiteboard markers. These are the wrong whiteboards. But anyway, education, offbeat careers. Okay. So typically, what would you want this podcast to accomplish? Okay.
Career.
So a student should, these are use cases, students should know alternative careers. I have really bad handwriting, I didn't score much in 10th. What else?
Every episode maybe you talk about one
career per episode. Per episode or per season?
per episode. Because if you are talking to students, you want to give them a taster rather than a
Right, very important. One career per episode. What else?
For colleges that are teaching different courses.
So options for the institute options related to this point. Institute options related to career. What else?
career growth opportunities.
Career growth opportunities.
The cost involved in the whole thing.
Yes. So
Cost
cost analysis.
and time. I mean, how long would the
Okay. Cost
take?
analysis, time analysis.
Interviews with people who do this.
Which comes under one career per episode. That's like the episode split now. Institute options and what were you saying?
Initial career opportunities and going forward.
Okay, career opportunities. Which also comes under per episode part. See, essentially, we have designed our entire podcast season, or maybe our entire podcast series.
When you say
Important
season,
time.
what do you mean?
By a season, I mean a package of episodes that, when heard together, sound like a complete unit. So,
Important time.
So it's a content bank.
You decide for yourself how long you would want it for.
Absolutely. Your season can be 10 episodes long, 20 episodes long, a year long. The advantage of having a season in mind is you get to have a constant outflow of information and a deadline for every episode. So तुमने अगर decide किया कि मेरा ये season साल भर चलेगा या summer vacations में चलेगा, wherein I'll be releasing one episode every 3 days. Then your summer vacation is 60 days, you need to have 20 episodes. So you need to have 20 careers according to this particular design of a podcast. Designing a podcast essentially means that you make a plan for yourself. This is an example plan that I have created for offbeat careers. You can actually start doing this right away. You can come up with 20 offbeat careers because you want a 20 episode bank. You want a 20 episode season. If you want a 10 episode season, find 10 offbeat careers. But what do you do for each podcast? कैसे करोगे? How do you design each episode?
You gather your information first, what you want to talk about.
Correct? So episode, say 1 is radio jockey, which I believe is an offbeat career of sorts. Okay, I'm taking this as an example because it's the closest one I know. So you have, your first episode is going to be about the career of a radio jockey. What is the most important thing you need for this episode?
A radio jockey.
You need a radio jockey. So you need a professional in the career chosen. Or in other words, you need the subject. What else do you need? You need an interview, you need a questionnaire. How does the questionnaire help?
Gives you an agenda for the topic.
Exactly. Remember this. Script. The questionnaire is your script. In this case, in an interview case or in a co-hosting case, your questionnaire is the script. And you need a questionnaire simply because you need to have an agenda. तुम 40 मिनट बात करो भले ही, तो 40 मिनट में तुमने पते की कोई बात नहीं की तो पॉइंट गए. So you need a questionnaire. What else do you need? और क्या लगेगा? It's an episode about radio jockey as an offbeat career, as an offbeat profession. You need research, background research. Background research से तुम्हारा questionnaire बनेगा. So yeah, questionnaire plus background research.
So your questionnaire will
If background research नहीं रहेगा तो भी चलेगा, because you can ask all your background research questions to the subject himself. That will form more content for your show.
That depends on your how you're structuring your show. If it's a profile show, then you want your background research. If it's purely interview, then you don't.
Correct.
No, and I was even thinking background research on things like what other radio jockeys are doing, how it is in other cities or countries,
Absolutely.
things like that.
Absolutely, you can do that. You can decide where the background research goes. I put this in because I have been assuming something about this. I have been assuming the level of this podcast is beginner. You need to decide the level of your podcast. The target audience. This is your teaching. Target group. I'm essentially giving away secrets of how radio stations work.
This is the secret of how any content person works.
Yeah, but then exactly that's
I'm also badgering on about target audience.
No, that's exactly the whole point about podcasts and blogs. Vivek was just talking about it in the alphabet sambar, in the word lounge, and I could identify a lot of stuff with what Vivek was saying. Because I am also talking about the same thing that Vivek is talking about, except he's talking about it from the perspective of a blog post, and I am talking about it from the perspective of podcast. Both of them are the same. Only the medium is different. One is non-linear visual writing, the other is linear audio. Theory.
This is Nicholas Varun, not Vivek.
Terribly sorry. Dale Carnegie will kill me.
I have a small,
It's my pen name is Vivek.
could I have a small part where the students can ask questions to the...
Absolutely, that's the Q&A session.
It's a session
So, audience interaction. Now this you have to do very carefully. Because a lot of this cannot be live in your case.
Unless you have like an audience sitting in a corner and watching.
So there are some talk shows that actually do that. They actually rent out an auditorium to set up the mics on the stage, and since the auditorium is automatically air-cooled and whatnot, podcasts like Tweet, podcasts like कौन सा satire podcast है किसी का है but anyway वो भी करते हैं. They have an
You
audience.
can't have a speaker-based phone and people can call up and that can be recorded.
Yeah, you can record in many ways. तुम्हारे phone पे if you have a call recording app, you can have it on your phone as well. But ideally, I would recommend on audience interaction because
Quality.
काम बढ़ाता है. Quality का problem तो है ही है, and वो काम बाद में बढ़ाता है.
Also, it's a podcast, it's not like a radio show which you're listening to live.
You want to design it like a radio show, you can.
See, there
वो भी कर सकते हैं.
are podcasts like that have this like answer me this. Which is the entire basis of it is basically they get questions and they answer those questions.
Yeah, the trick that they use is they pre-record the questions and then patch it in.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's a trick you can use. You can call your whoever, pre-record the question, then play it out and ask your person of interest, your subject the question, and then record it accordingly. Then patch the original question whenever you are post-processing it. But essentially, I have just structured an episode in terms of content. All I now need to do is structure it in terms of flow. So I will open with an introduction of the subject, and then I'll start firing questions one by one along the questionnaire. There will be occasions where questions from the questionnaire will be promptly answered by the subject. There will be occasions where he anticipate the question and answer it. You need to keep a track of the questions on your questionnaire. Typically, I would say that this episode should not run for more than 12 minutes. Because 12 मिनट में तुमको जितना जूस निकालना है निकाल सकते हो. A page and a half, or rather a page is equivalent to a minute and a half. A page of Times New Roman font 12 is equal to a minute and a half of spoken content. So if you have 10 minutes, you have about 20 pages worth of material, 20-25 pages worth of material. That's a lot of material. इतना तो होना भी नहीं चाहिए. What you put in the questionnaire, what you ask the subject is entirely up to you and entirely up to the level in which you are conducting the podcast, but always maintain the same level. And this is going to be extremely difficult for you to do because you will tend to slip. But don't worry about it, record it, edit it out. And please don't be afraid to edit. Please don't. People think that you are probably spoiling the honesty of the entire conversation, which is. At the end of the day, nobody is a orator and nobody knows how to put their words in exact form. So it's okay if you edit, bring it down to their whisper level, edit out the pauses, ums, ahs, vowels and whatnot. And if someone has mumbled a lot, ask them to repeat the sentence. Could you repeat that please? Edit karo. The whole point of this entire exercise was A. Design your podcast, B. Design your episode, and C. Always have a script ready. I hope I haven't been too forceful about it, but I hope I have made the point clear. The reason for it being scripted of sorts. It's not scripted, but whatever. Yeah, podcasting plugins के बारे में बाद में बात करता हूँ.
Shrikant, what do you do when you've got multiple speakers, like say a conversation and I find people speak at different volumes and you can keep telling a person loudly, they start with, I do this and blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely don't worry.
Or just that in the software.
Yeah, that is exactly what Audacity does. So now I'll quickly do a session with Audacity.
Audacity also do video podcasting.
Sorry?
Does Audacity support video podcasting?
I'm not really sure. I haven't tried video with Audacity. I usually video के लिए I go for Sony Vegas Pro because that's the software available to all the studios and Vegas does a great job. Typically in proper video editing setups you will see things like Pro Tools being used or Adobe Illustrator being used or FCP Final Cut Pro being used. But for छोटा मोटा काम Audacity should work fine. Video के लिए even your Windows Video Editor जो भी है Movie Maker works absolutely great by the way. You guys should try Windows Movie Maker if you are thinking of doing a video thing. So yeah, sample project तो मैंने open रखा ही है. Why won't this give me a full screen? Windows 10, I hate you. Alright. This is a base waveform. This is a simple frequency kind of a waveform of the audio that is from Coffee Breaks Palace. Now what I'm going to do is, I can see this space is empty. Okay. This is basically dB gain, which is decibel gain, which is the amount of, let's just say, volume of the sound. Now in Audacity and in most other softwares, there is a feature called normalizing. What normalize does is it allows you to tweak your audio. This is the volume of the file as of now. This is the volume of the conversation as of now. Look what happens when I do. See the difference in the waveform. Changed marginally, but it did. You can normalize certain portions of the audio as per your convenience. So suppose you think this should sound louder, you simply normalize it. Post-production basically involves editing out portions of audio that you don't need. I may have a few of my interviews here that I think I'll try and edit. Just give me a second while I figure out my. The beauty about Audacity is you can drag and drop any audio file, even an MP3, and it will immediately open it into Audacity project. What Audacity does is it takes in the details of the MP3 file and then allows you to work with the MP3 file, so to speak, and you can slice it, dice it, cut it, chop it, whichever way you want. And it will essentially keep the MP3 file unchanged, but it will keep those changes in mind and allow you to export only the slice, dice, edited part to your convenience. Right? And this is essentially what most of these digital audio editors will do. So now this is an interview that I did with Palash Sen. These are very low volume. So what I am going to do now is I am going to select portions of this audio. Okay, this is Palash speaking. So what I do is I select portions of this audio. I'm just doing random stuff right now. If you guys want to. Okay, listen to this part of the conversation. I would really appreciate if you guys could come closer because मेरे laptop का volume इतना ही है and there isn't an audio setup. है? If you could get speakers, it would be great. There are no numbers that I know of.
Radio channels you have numbers, TVs you have numbers. Okay,
Even for radio we don't have concrete numbers. We go by surveys.
Rough numbers.
Yeah.
You have very specific numbers because you see the number of downloads.
Yeah, you see the number of downloads, you see the number of plays, which is why you typically go with something like a SoundCloud. I would very genuinely ask people to set it up on a SoundCloud, to upload your podcast files on SoundCloud and embed it into your WordPress pages. There are podcasting plugins available. WordPress is actually a very good plugin that I have heard of. There is Blueberry, that is also a good plugin. There is podcasting plugin by TSG, that's another good plugin. All of these plugins essentially serve media from your own server. Now if you're on a shared hosting, it kind of gets a little difficult.
You can upload it to SoundCloud and then.
Yeah, upload it to SoundCloud. SoundCloud will give you an embed code. Just embed that into your WordPress using a standard HTML widget.
And this works with podcasting software as well. I mean, Pocket Cast or something.
Yeah. SoundCloud has an RSS feed.
Okay.
So SoundCloud
So
will.
if I embed my WordPress feed into like, I mean, I can just.
Absolutely.
It's a regular podcast.
It's a regular podcast. In fact, you will have two feeds. You will have the WordPress feed and you will have a SoundCloud feed. So you can give whichever one as your podcast. Except WordPress, you get to add a little more content, a bit more masala, add a bit more of stuff to it.
Sure. Lightning है.
No.
लाइट नहीं चल रहा है क्या? Palash is saying.
I think it's not I think हमारे देश में ऐसे बनी तो I think everybody is coming says यार हमारे देश के लोगों को ये चाहिए ऐसा नहीं लोगों को वही चाहिए तो तुमको दे अगर किसी को ऑप्शन ही नहीं है तो क्या
So, how many different things has Palash said in this entire conversation, in this part so far? What has Palash exactly said so far?
What actually people want in something like that.
Can you put it in one line?
The kind of film that should be produced.
Palash is something along those lines. Palash is saying that people who make films think that people want certain kind of films. That's not true. People want stuff that you give them. A very Steve Jobs-like statement, which is essentially what he's saying. And he's taken about 20 seconds to say this. Yeah, he's taken 25 seconds to say this. I can reduce it to 5 seconds sharp. Which is the crux of all editing. You need to figure out, and it happens a lot because people don't exactly know. People know what they want to say, people don't know how they want to say it, how they want to put it. Even while saying this sentence, I said 3 different things when all I could have said was, people are not great orators, you need to be their orator through your software. I'm not saying edit it so drastically that the end product sounds different, but just edit out the portions that aren't really needed.
I think I think इस तरह की फिल्म बननी चाहिए. I think हमारे देश के बनी तो I think everybody is coming says यार हमारे देश के लोगों को ये चाहिए ऐसा नहीं लोगों को वही चाहिए I think हमारे देश में I think everybody is coming says यार हमारे देश I think everybody is coming. I think it's not funny. But I think people, I think everybody is coming says, यार हमारे देश के लोगों को ये चाहिए ऐसा नहीं.
Message in any way? Have I changed what Palash is saying in any way? I have kept the crux of his conversation. I have kept the soul of his statement, but I have brought it down from 25 seconds to 9. Essentially मैंने 17 सेकंड निकाल दिए उसमें से, बाकी का सारा unnecessary है मेरे लिए. So whenever you record a conversation, let the conversation flow. But when you are re-listening to it, when you are on Audacity, and this I can't teach you in 30 minutes, this I can't teach you in 15 minutes, which is why I'm not even bothering to explain what I did. I'll just tell you that this works exactly like Microsoft Word except for audio. You select words that you don't want, you delete them. Or it works like Photoshop. You select portions of your image, visual or audio image that you don't want, delete it or overlap it or do whatever. Now this is something, there is something called a multi-track system. This is a multi-track system. So if I want, I can add special effects in this. I can very literally bring in this here. Where did my editors?
I think different conditions. I think everybody is coming says they are why this low age as a rule. As a rule, लोगों को वही चाहिए तो क्यों करें? अगर किसी को ऑप्शन ही नहीं है तो क्या होगा? ऐसा नहीं लोगों को वही चाहिए तो क्यों करें? अगर किसी को ऑप्शन ही नहीं है ऑप्शन ही नहीं है हिंदी में ऑप्शन सीखते रहो अगर किसी को ऑप्शन ही नहीं है तो क्या होगा?
That's as it is as easy to add sound effects into the system. What I've done is I've added more tracks to it. जैसे Photoshop में layers होते हैं, जैसे इसमें tracks होते हैं. So हर track पे अलग-अलग चीज डालो, वो एक के ऊपर एक overlap हो जाएगा और आपको मिक्स करके एक फाइनल साउंड मिल जाएगा. So when I edit this entire thing, इसको सिर्फ पोजीशन बराबर से करना होगा. मैंने इसको अभी बहुत रफली एंड बहुत वियर्ड पोजीशन किया हुआ है. But if I position this right,
वही चाहिए तो अगर किसी को ऑप्शन ही नहीं है तो क्या होगा?
work with it, experiment with it a little, and then you select this entire thing across tracks, and then file, export audio. Export audio करोगे तो वो पोर्शन में जो भी है सारा का सारा एक्सपोर्ट हो जाएगा, and you will have a compact mixed in file. The point that I'm essentially trying to make is this is not a scary piece of software. This is an extremely easy to use piece of software. You just need to work with it a little bit. Of course, this is not as useful as, let's say, a Sony Vegas or a Pro Tools or an FCP or something like that. But then again, those are professional piece of software. जो अगर आप सीखोगे, तो you are better off working in a studio. मतलब then you use those talents to make some money on the side and whatnot. But for your day-to-day use, for your day-to-day podcasting needs, this is an excellent piece of software. मैंने अभी आपके सामने 25 सेकंड का एक ऑडियो काट के 9 सेकंड का बनाया. I have kept the soul intact. I have kept the audio intact. I haven't changed anything, except made it crisper, cleaner, and shorter. Remember the parts that we discussed where a good podcast has to be very short. The brevity is the soul of a podcast. So yeah, feel free to use any audio software that you feel like using. Feel free to edit. And believe me when I say this, people, editing is necessary. You can't let a podcast go on for 40 minutes where a person is rambling away to glory without making any sense. That's not a podcast. That's a nukkad ki conversation. And अगर nukkad का conversation सुनना है तो मैं 40 MB data download नहीं करूँगा. मैं nukkad पे जाके सुनूँगा. मैं खुद दोस्तों के साथ वो conversation करूँगा. As for recording, feel free to record however you want and wherever you want. Cleaning audio in Audacity is as simple as selecting an empty piece of audio, going to effect, noise reduction, get noise profile, going into effect again, noise reduction, selecting the whole thing. Sorry, I forgot to select the whole thing first. मैंने noise profile लिया है. Now I select the whole thing. Effect, noise reduction. Don't change anything else because it usually works the way it is. And just stay okay. It reduces noise by itself. It is as easy as that. So if you're worried about noise being recorded and noise interrupting your conversation to the extent where people won't be able to hear you, don't worry. This does the job. This very literally does the job. Although अगर मैं इस point पे record करूँ, तो there is something screaming in the background. वो noise scream करने में मेरे को तकलीफ होएगा. The moment that stops and the only noise in this room is that of the fans, this will do the job. That's all it takes. This is actually a 59-minute conversation, which is why it is taking a long time. Oh, very good. मैंने पूरी noise को sample दिया तो उनको दिखा नहीं है वो. तुम चुप हो जाओ. इसमें actually noise है नहीं, मेरे studio में recording है, so there isn't much noise in this one. But anyway, if you want a separate session on noise reduction techniques and whatnot, I give you those as well. The point being, feel free to record and make sure you edit it down to the right size. It is extremely important to edit down a podcast. I do believe we have time for some questions. Do we? Yeah. Okay. Then please let us have some questions.
How do you start making money on podcasts?
Join a radio station.
Everybody's not going to be hired.
No.
So, like a blogger, after some time you do get paid to write or review or something. So, does it work with podcasts as well or no?
See, in India, I haven't seen many podcasters making money. I'll be very honest and forthright. In India,
So, you just do it out of passion, is that what you're saying?
You do it out of passion and you hope that your passion is noticed by an advertiser willing to pay you money.
But do people listen to podcasts in India so much?
They don't, because there aren't too many podcasts to listen to. It's like a catch-22, it's like a vicious circle. They don't listen to podcasts because there isn't enough content.
Okay.
A lot of the telecom operators tried starting it on their phones. They tried getting Amitabh Bachchan involved. They tried getting Amitabh Bachchan to record.
So it's in the nascent stage, that's what you're saying.
It's very nascent. But the thing is, I believe that India can come up with great podcasts because हम by nature बहुत ड्रामेबाज हैं. And वो हमारे podcast में automatically निकल आएगा. But कोई शुरुआत तो करे. And the reason I took this session is because I wanted to convey to people that podcasting is actually quite easy. And podcasting isn't as scary as it is cut out to be. It's just, instead of writing, you're saying it out aloud. And then like you edit your first draft, make a second draft, third draft, you keep editing until you find the right concise formation of words which doesn't sound awkward to hear. That's one of the few things that you learn as you edit more and more. कि तुम्हारे edits में you can't really make the person sound like it was patched together. So if something sounds like it was patched together, Control Z, undo. Let it be as it is. The one thing that you have to be careful of is over editing. और edit लेकिन प्यार से, और होगा प्यार से. Questions? Was this session useful? Is my biggest question.
Yes, it was.
Did this session make any sense? This is my biggest question. Because I basically came here to talk about podcasting and why people should podcast. With WordPress, without WordPress is your call entirely.
See, FM has got a definite audience because
It is perceived in a certain way.
not only perceived, but
Because you want to listen to it. But a podcast is something.
not want to listen to it. Like there are certain activities like driving a car. Or something.
Exactly.
You don't have anything else to listen to or watch. Nowadays, of course, there are some video-based things which are available. As of today, but today it's not available. So there is a definite audience for it. Train में जा रहे हैं तो easiest
Which
thing
is
to
where I want podcasts to go. I want FM to be threatened by podcasts.
Oh.
I desperately want
It's
it.
such a big medium, you think?
It is.
That it can be a competitor.
Absolutely, it is.
there are podcasts that became radio shows.
वो है, but eventually now that BSNL has gone to a 2 Mbps connection as baseline, we will have people with good internet connection.
Not for uploading but for listening. When you're traveling.
नहीं डाउनलोड करके भी सुनते हैं. मैंने ये 80 एपिसोड कॉफी ब्रेक स्पेनिश के डाउनलोड करके सुने. I downloaded the entire podcast library, their entire podcast episode library, put it up on my stick, I put it into my system and played it.
Yeah, I have something like 150 podcast episodes downloaded on my phone.
Just
Different.
just to listen to
Because he doesn't like to listen to FM radio, which is entirely his fault.
Okay.
There are a lot of people who don't like listening to us on radio because they think we talk rubbish shit.
Okay.
Which
I
is
have
part of
BBC radio shows on my podcast. Like they are also podcast.
I am out of time, right?
No, we are just joining you.
So I do realize that I am actually out of time. So, but please feel free to ask questions until the next speaker comes in, which is when I get up and go.
When we talk about SoundCloud and podcast, majorly I have noticed that when we do podcast, we upload it on SoundCloud. But how fine or good it is to upload it somewhere in as a YouTube video, putting a slide and just as a podcast.
You can do that as well.
YouTube, I think, as an audience, I think a lot of people are coming to YouTube and listening to it in comparison to other SoundCloud.
One of the things
That's why I asked you one of the.
I have, and you can also use YouTube as a podcasting
And is it
slides.
okay if you put one podcast on two different platforms?
Absolutely okay.
You don't have any copyright issues with
No,
It's your copyright. It's entirely your copyright. You put it on SoundCloud, you put it on YouTube, you put it on Dailymotion, you put it on Vimeo. It's just that your plays get split up across those platforms. Ideally, if you want to track how your podcast is
create
behaving.
blog content and then share it on different social media sites so you get the maximum readership. Same way over here.
You wouldn't put your blog post on WordPress and Blogspot and webs or whatever and whatnot.
You
You
can
would
post
put
it in one and actually share it on different content consuming sites like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn.
I think that makes more sense that way.
Different blog sites.
We both are trying to start, we are planning to start a podcast in Marathi.
आनंद आहे अगदी.
What will be the starting point for us? आम्ही जरा लेट आलो.
नाही ठीक आहे.
आम्ही बऱ्याच ठिकाणी शोधत
The starting point high. Actually, माझ्या सेशनमध्ये I devoted a part of it to how to start a podcast. So the biggest point that I kept making was designing a podcast. सीझनच्या हिशोबाने विचार करा. तुम्हाला पॉडकास्ट कोणत्या विषयावरती करायचा आहे?
WordPress design and development.
WordPress design and development.
And content. Means it's a educational.
It's more of WordPress in Marathi.
WordPress in मराठी. कोणासाठी करायचं आहे?
Typically,
newbies.
एक गोष्ट आणि सिटी सोडून जी मुलं आहेत कॉलेज स्टुडंट्स आहेत
हां.
ज्यांना वर्डप्रेसमध्ये इंटरेस्ट असू शकतो just because they don't have basic resources like good internet connection. आता त्यांच्यासाठी पॉडकास्ट करणं हे थोडं आम्हाला आयरॉनिक वाटतं कारण त्यांच्याकडे जर चांगलं कनेक्शन नसेल
तर तो podcast ऐकणार कसा? असं.
पण एक आयडिया सगळ्यांना अशी आहे मी स्वतः
Television podcast
मी स्वतः
Thank you, Shrikant.
लोकेशन मी स्वतः T5 सिटीमध्ये रिलोकेटेड
Yeah.
But okay, there are people who are interested. Just they don't know any resource. And when they
पॉडकास्ट डिलिव्हरी मीडियम काही असू शकतो बरं का. पॉडकास्ट डिलिव्हरी मीडियम इंटरनेट असावा अशातला भाग नाहीये. हार्डडिस्क घेऊन जाऊन तिकडे त्यांना देणं आणि लँड पार्टी लावणं सुद्धा पॉडकास्ट डिलिव्हरी आहे माझ्या मते अकॉर्डिंग टू मी. I believe that you can deliver a podcast anyways. Then when we come down, understand my
It's
concept.
a deal breaker. So if you want to